everybody. I'm Jacqueline Thong. I'm the co-founder of Ubiqi Health. So thanks for that introduction. So again, what we're doing at Ubiqi Health is we're creating a personal discovery platform to help people with various chronic conditions identify which treatments or lifestyle changes can positively impact their health. And we started with focusing on people with migraines, and I'm going to tell you the story of how we got to where we are and where we're evolving to. And instead of talking a lot about our product and how all that works, I think I'd like to focus on some of the challenges and lessons that we've learned in our journey so far and how that's helping us move forward. So I think the basic thing that we've recognized that motivated my team and I to look at the problems that we're trying to address is that the problem with caring for a chronic condition, it means a lot of trial and error. So whether that's chronic pain or allergies, a lot of what happens here, and this little cartoon is really basically what happens. Even with the highest degree of care or the best doctors we can afford, a lot of it is just guessing and trying new medications. And part of that problem is because we don't really have the data to support what might be the best specific treatment plan for somebody like me. So with that sort of as the background, I'd just like to take you through a bit of our story. So my background is in clinical research, and I spent about 7 years working in clinical research, developing electronic patient diary systems for collecting patient data in pharmaceutical clinical trials. And some of you might recognize that Palm Pilot device. That's what we developed those systems on, and they were pretty clunky. But what was really amazing was that those clinical trials had extremely high data collection adherence. So no matter what population, regardless of demographic, location, illness, we were able to achieve something like 90% adherence and above. So why this was remarkable was that it made me think about wonder why was it that people were able to adhere? Was it just because they were being compensated for being a clinical trial? No, I didn't think so, especially given how clunky and difficult the Palm Pilots were at the time in 2002. But really, when we probed the users, the patients, they came to tell us and said, this was really helped me feel like I had more control over my condition. And so that sparked something in me, wondering that, wow, the act of self-reporting actually helps you feel like you have more control, and that might help you feel better. The other thing that was really interesting was that the patients that were involved in these trials would sometimes write into our help desk, and instead of asking questions about how they could better use their Palm device, they would ask, is there any way we can see the summary reports of our data? I don't think it's fair that my doctor gets to see my progress report, and he gets to see this before I come in for my visit, but I actually don't have any view at all. Of course, in a controlled clinical trial, there was no way we could allow patients to access their own data, because that could unblind the trial. So I started thinking about this in the context of disease management, and how maybe if we turned the model on its head and allowed access to consumers to use these kinds of tools, we could help them gain better control over their condition, but let them interact with their data. So that's the idea that started me on this path to found Ubiqi Health. And so we started with what we would call our minimum viable product, for those of you who know lean startup methodology. We started with a very simple migraine tracker that's available for the iPhone and Android. And we watched how people use this to track their migraines and find patterns. And from that, we saw that we were able to gain a user base and that people were doing it regularly. And then we started to look at what this data was telling us and how we could learn about people with migraines and their treatments and their triggers from the aggregated data. So beyond just looking at it on an individual basis, what can we learn from the crowd? And so fast forward to now, what we've learned, and I'll get into this a little bit further, is that we need to be supporting this idea of personalized experiments. What we found when we looked at the data beyond the aggregate was that on an individual level, we saw that some of our users, now not all, but some people were enlightened enough. Maybe they were quantified self people, maybe they had science or math backgrounds, but they were actually doing personal experiments. And you could see in their data that they were saying, okay, starting caffeine-free now. And then you would see that they are caffeine-free, and they're tracking their migraines against that and seeing if that actually helped them. Other people said trying the gluten-free diet for 4 weeks. Let's see if this works. And so that sort of got us thinking about how we could further support this for people who wouldn't otherwise do that on their own. So I'm just going to take what we've done with migraine as a case. There's a lot more that we can do, but I think that we've learned a lot of things through this that are helping us move forward, and I'd want to share this with the community so that we can help the community move Quantified Self in the health context forward. So we have 15,000 active users, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you look at the data and you think about it in the context of health, it gets pretty interesting. Over 42,000 migraines have been reported, and that's beyond the actual use of our platform, but that's just how many headaches our community has had. So I think a few people have asked or raised the question about utilization. So how long do people use this? And yes, it's a challenge in self-quantification. People will start a project and then drop off. And ours is no exception. You can see that the majority of people use it twice and then sort of don't really come back to it. But what's also interesting is that once people use it 10 or 11 times, they're sort of locked in. So you can see this sort of long tail of people, and you can see at the very end, we have users who have logged hundreds of entries. So the sort of like the top 5% of our users are logging a lot of information, and they're the ones who are probably getting the most benefit from it. So admittedly is a challenge, and I think everybody in this industry will see a kind of similarly shaped curve, and there's a lot more we can do to increase that, to improve those. But the data is valuable, and we partner with pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies, and there are things that our data is revealing that our partners couldn't otherwise access anywhere else. For example, this is with a migraine treatment against what are other therapies that people are using at the same time. So one lesson that we learned that we thought was really important was what are the motivations? And this might be different by disease area, but for a symptomatic condition like migraine, where it's episodic and the symptoms are fairly acute, what came up time and time again was that people want to discover patterns so that they can try to predict the onset of their condition. The other thing is understanding treatment efficacy. So this goes back to the earlier cartoon that I had about the doctor basically saying, well, let's try you on this new therapy. Trying isn't something that a lot of people want to hear after they've tried 5 or 6 different drugs. That motivation to try another one sort of goes down over time. And so what we found out from our users is that some of them are starting to use our tool as a platform for measuring the efficacy of one treatment or a dose of a treatment, and then following that over time and seeing at the next visit if there has been any change from the previous. The other important thing is about sharing, and you might laugh about this because in the way that the Ubiqi Health users share their data is not very sophisticated at all. Today, we don't integrate with any EMR system, and their doctors aren't logging into a web portal. But in fact, what's interesting is that the physicians that we've spoken to said, you know what, it's just fine if it's pretty low tech, just a printout that I can put in their file, because that means that there's no red tape with the hospital systems. But in any case, the most engaged users, our top quartile, top 25% of our users who have had the more than 10 entries, more than 20 entries, they're the ones who are sharing their data with somebody else. Be that a care provider, could be a chiropractor, it could be a relative, or rather surprisingly, disability claims. So that was an important piece to learn. Number 3 was how people were doing experiments on their own. And this was actually the big surprise, that there were users that were that enlightened that they were going to use our platform for that. So these are actually real examples that we found through their data. And we saw people recording first day of a new medication, trying to go gluten-free, going off caffeine, or asking a question like, does weather affect me? And in this example here, we're showing an example of how our platform is able to pull in data, weather information, and data from other diet tracking tools to be able to show a person patterns so that they can interact with that data in a fairly simple way and come to some actionable insights that they can. So what does this do? If somebody knows that their migraines are related to low barometric pressure, that means that a weather forecast could be the best tool for them. That means they can take a preventative when a storm's coming. So then this journey has sort of taken us back to the question about, okay, we've been able to help the patients, but how is the data useful for the community, but for the healthcare system as a whole? And taking this idea of the personalized experiment, we want to be able to provide both the personalized feedback, but also feedback to our partners, to our pharmaceutical companies who want to know, how does this therapy compare with another one? Is my therapy as effective with a particular population? So we can, with the data that we're collecting, we can segment populations or stratify them in an infinite number of means, by demographics, by what kind of variant of the condition they have. And how we're helping people do that moving forward is to provide sort of templates for running these personalized experiments. We recognize that a very small segment of our user base was smart enough to be able to figure those out, but not everybody does. And so in whatever ways we can do to nudge our users to take a more structured look at how they're trying to find patterns, the more we can help people arrive at, take the guesswork out of managing their condition, but then ultimately our data becomes more clean and more structured and more interesting and useful. So I think it's really interesting what quantified self in general can do moving forward. And for us, we want to see a future where patients are empowered enough and have the data at their disposal to be able to share their insights and their success with their doctors.